You're listening to the Roundup Podcast, a podcast on reaching the college campus, developing leaders, and sending out kingdom multipliers. This podcast is created by the Southern Baptists of Texas Convention and provided through cooperative program giving.
Well, howdy, friends, and welcome to the Roundup Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Tidwell. I have with me today my co-host, Kylie. Kylie, how are you?
I'm doing good, especially since I have my friend here.
Yeah,
so that's good.
Yeah, it's cool. So we have Whitney Brown with us today, who Whitney, how would you describe yourself? We have Enneagram whiz here. Is that accurate?
Oh, yeah. You could call me Enneagram spiritual director. Enneagram coach, Enneagram expert. There's many things you could call me, I guess.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here today. And that's exactly what we want to talk about is the Enneagram. And the reason why we want to do this is Kylie and I have had this podcast, and anytime the Enneagram gets brought up, everybody's eyes just get like really wide and want to talk about it and dissect everybody. And I feel like half the people don't really know who they are, or at least don't want to admit to who they are, or they don't like their number. They wish their number was something different. So anyways, we'll get into that here in just a minute. But before we do, wouldn't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you do, and kind of why you got into the Enneagram?
Yeah, so I am recently moved here about 3 years ago from Oregon. I am a senior graphic designer at the moment, but I got into the Enneagram about 6 years ago. My pastor, I was hanging out with my pastor and a few friends, and he said, hey, if you want to know the dark side, if you want to know your sin, take this Enneagram test and you'll see it'll hurt. But if you want to feel the pain, go for it. And I think my eyes just lit up and I'm like, I don't know if I'm a masochist. And I was like, yes, I want to know. And so I took a test online and, it gave me my results like normal, like, the top 3. But I didn't really know much. But as I got into it more and read up on it, it really did bring up a lot of things that I didn't really recognize, that even my friend had to pull me aside and go, yeah, you kind of do that. I'm like, what? The Enneagram as a tool has been something in my life that's really changed a lot. And then moving here 3 years ago, I took the Enneagram Journey class with Suzanne Stabile, and also just read up and did a lot of courses. And yeah, so far it's been an amazing journey, and it's definitely pointed me back to Jesus.
So this was all birthed out of someone, giving you a tool to confront sin in your life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he told me, he's like, it's going to hurt. And I'm like, let's bring it on.
Well, I don't think most people think about the Enneagram that way. So is that really what it's designed for? What is like the origination of it? Like, how does it... Mm-hmm. I mean, because I think for most people, when they think of Enneagram, well, not most people, but I just, when I confront the Enneagram, it's usually through someone who's sharing their Instagram post that has the 7 and all the little things around it or something. But really, this is really to confront some of the darker sides of yourself.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun posts on Instagram, but the downside to that, the Instagram culture for the Enneagram, is it's kind of made a tool that's really supposed to kind of create growth and point out kind of the darkness of your life and motivations, kind of made it lighter and turned it into more of a horoscope thing, which, yeah, it's a little disheartening for me, but it is fun to laugh sometimes. Some of the memes are funny and some of the information is accurate, but there's a lot of misinformation on Instagram as well. So yeah, ultimately the origination of the tool is pretty convoluted. I probably would take another whole podcast to get into that, but the best way I would say to look at it is it's a tool similar to going to therapy or going to the doctor. It's a way, a method in how you can become self-aware. But it's not a transformation tool. It doesn't actually, it points to the fact that you need it. Mm-hmm. So, but it can't provide it. Self-awareness isn't the answer. Anyway, yeah, so I think it's picking up a lot of steam in the Christian community because of that. But then there is this kind of shallow side that I think a lot of people are exposed to, which is on Instagram, where they take like a bingo quiz and they go, oh, I think I'm this number. And you're like, oh, there's so much you can learn. So yeah, that answers your question. I'm not sure.
No, that's really good, because I don't know that a lot of people are aware of just kind of the origination that it is. I mean, I would, from what I've read and from what you said, it is Christian in its origination. You know, it was used to help as almost like a discipleship tool to help confront sin and help you know, like, where, you know, darkness and sin is in your life. So what was that like for you, you know, when that tool was shared with you? Like, tell us how that, I don't know, I guess, how did you interact with the Enneagram, and how did it help you, and what was your experience? Because obviously you're pretty convinced of it. You're pretty passionate about it. So what about that whole experience really? I don't know, tell us about it.
So initially, I was similar to a lot of people. I took a test. So the tests are about 65% accurate. And I did score highest in the number that I am, which is a 2. But very close second was a 7. And so I thought I was maybe a 7. And so I'd kind of go back and forth, and I'd talk to my friends. I'm like, which one do you think I am? I'll say this, like, you have that one basic desire and fear is really important to figure out. And that's what a lot of the materials I was reading was, you're not stuck in a box. It's just pointing out the box you're in. So figuring out what box you put yourself in at a very young age is very important to start off. So I was kind of racking my brain. When I moved here was when I took that Enneagram Journey course, and definitely got to the point where I realized I was a 2. And so earlier on in Oregon, my friend Mara kind of pulled me aside and confronted me about some of the maybe 2-ish things I did. And that was my first interaction of feeling like I was stabbed in the gut, because I read something where, I don't like force people to do the thing I think will be best for them or what they need. And Mara called me and left a voicemail saying, hey, I just wanted to call you because I wanted to talk to you about something. And I'm like, all day at work, just like, what is she going to talk to me about? The way that she said it sounded so morose. Like, she's going to tell me that I was the worst friend ever. I'm thinking all these awful things about myself. And then she finally, I call her during like a break. I'm like, Mara, you got to tell me, because this is driving me nuts. And so she ended up saying like, well, the other day you said you didn't do that. Well, you do. And I'm like, really? She's like, yeah. And you did it the other day to a friend. And she gave me an example. And I was like, ow, ow, that hurts. Yeah. So here, doing more work, it's kind of been like an onion process where I'm finding the layers and the layers of my motivation kind of fleshed out in so many ways. You have a dark soul night moment where you just go, what have I been doing? Have I even done anything altruistically? Has it all just been to get people to like me? It's just but through this kind of, I would say, butterfly moment, that sounds so woo-woo, but I feel like God just put me in this cocoon when I first moved here, and all I could do was just work on myself and think about my motivations and what my true desires were and what my true fears were. And I think the biggest revelation I got was that what you fear determines what you desire determines what you fear, and what you fear is what you focus on, and what you focus on points to an idol. And I realized that my idol was other people. My idol was vanity. My idol wasn't God. God wasn't in the number one spot, because if he was, I wouldn't be so scared to disappoint everyone all the time. Instead, I could be confident in knowing that God's with me, and he's giving me what I need to do, If anything, I should be filtering all that through God first, So that's kind of some of the spiritual growth that it's given me, and why I'm very jazzed about it, because for those who are willing to do the work, it does point to Jesus, I think.
Share that sequence again. You said what motivates you is what you fear. Say that again. What was that?
What you desire determines what you fear, and what you fear is where your attention and focus goes. And where your attention is, that's what you're worshiping. That's your idol. So it's a pretty good like formula for me. Whenever I'm scared about something, I'm like, am I actually fearing God in this moment? What am I actually desiring then? Is it God? Is it, and maybe if I'm going to be more specific, is it something that's edifying to me? Is it something that's going to give me life? Is it something that is worth desiring and worth fearing? Because there's desires like you can desire to be married or you can desire to go to college, and those desires aren't necessarily wrong. But more often than that, if you break it down, your desire to go to college, is it rooted in something like, I need to prove myself? I'm not worthy until I can get an education, Or is it, I have a desire, even for marriage, like I have a desire to be married. Like, okay, do you believe that God is enough for you? Do you see the value of God as the groom or the bride, I guess? Well, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm like, I'm a female. So for the male, you know what I mean? But all to say, like, do you see the sufficiency of God as important? And what do you think you're not lacking? So it does create this very helpful tunnel. So yeah, what you desire determines what you fear, what you worship, and then your idol.
So what are some things that helped you like stick to this and kind of finding out those like deeper things rather than trailing on to like the bingo and like the Instagram and this is my personality and like how would you advise someone to like, what advice would you give them to like get the most out of it?
Yeah, so I would say that the best way to get the most out of it is, I think at first I would say if you're typing yourself based off of shallow criteria, then you're not going to get a good result. So if it's like, oh, 3s are so vain and they love this and they love cars and looking nice, that's wrong and stereotypical. Those are shallow observations that anyone can make on the outside. It's what is motivating you internally that is the more important work. So if you're, for me, when I was dealing with, am I a 2 or a 7? I'm like, well, I'm extroverted and I'm fun and I like have a lot of energy. So like, and people would say, you could be a 7. And people even now will say, are you a 7? And on the outside, I look like that. But internally, I'm motivated because I desire to, like, let me rephrase that. When I'm not aware of it or not surrendered to Christ, I am motivated and driven by a need for people to like me and a fear of rejection. And that's been like the darkest moments of my life. So I think right off the bat, if you want to do the deeper work, the first thing you need to ask is like, what is the shallow stuff? You don't look at the shallow stuff to type yourself. Look at the motivations, like look at what drives your decision making and not necessarily the results of those decision making. And then secondly, I want to say this, like, you can find all of this wisdom in the Bible and through the Holy Spirit alone. You can do that work. So the reason why I say that is this tool is kind of a tool to help you get rooted back into the word, and go back to scripture, because that's where the transformation is. That's where the transformation is. And right now I'm like reading through the Old Testament and I'm just kind of trying to just take it in. And it's crazy how God will just highlight wisdom for me, even in stories that seem pretty, maybe gory or harsh. But the word is living and active and sharper than any double-edged sword. It's the power, it's the transformation tool. So if the Enneagram isn't pointing you back to the word, is not pointing you back to Christ, then you're not going to find transformation. You're just going to find like a horoscope reading. And thirdly, talk to friends. That my friend Mara, she's one of my best friends. And if it wasn't for her, I probably would have been like, I'm just a 7. So I think for her, it was like really hard for her to confront me because there's like a fear of maintaining the relationship. And at the moment, I don't think we were close, you know, but it was because she confronted me that I trusted her more and our friendship got deeper. So I would encourage anybody that's like, I'm scared. If you want to confront someone about it, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I would just say, if you want the deeper work as a person, ask people that you trust, that love the Lord, and that will tell you the honest truth. And sometimes people are wrong. That, you know, always go to the scripture and make sure whatever they said lines up with that, or lines up with other wise counsel. But ultimately, good friends and community in the church is there because it's kind of accountability. So, yeah, they can kind of tell you, yeah, you do that, actually. Yeah. Anyway, so those are my 3 things.
So, you know, again, I mentioned this earlier, but I feel like when you hear about things on the Enneagram that are, you know, posted, it's usually, I feel like it's highlighting maybe things that are admirable or things that are good about a certain number, but it sounds like it's probably best used actually to learn just the deep internal nasty stuff. So
yeah, well, so like some people, I've heard people complain, like, at least the ones that have gone through maybe the darker parts of the Enneagram, it's so negative. Like, this is hard. I think it's really easy to spot what your dark sides are rather than your light. I mean, that's why I think it differs from other personality tests like Myers-Briggs, like extroverted and optimistic, you know, those things are positive and you can be like, okay, yeah, people can, it's not that it's more important to focus on the darker stuff. It's just that we don't.
yeah.
So going into the darker stuff and pointing out the harsh reality of your motivation. And another thing is, you're not your Enneagram number. That's not who you are. That's the motive. You're not your personality type. Like, you put that motivation on you and wore it. And then Christ is asking you to take off that garment and put on the righteousness of Christ, being clothed in his identity rather than the identity or motivation that got you to survive the world. So you can go, oh, that's so fun. Like, yeah, I always do that. And when you see an Instagram post that's relatable, I don't want to shame people and like finding some enjoyment in that. That's fine. But ultimately, that's not who you are. And there's a gift in there that God's given you, and you've used that gift to get what you want. And God's asking to like give it to him, you know? So an example for me would be as a 2, desire to be liked, fear of rejection. The gift, I would say, is compassion, seeing the needs of others, and an active compassion and love that's genuine and authentic, right? I would say that 2s naturally have that. If I use that to manipulate other people to like me, it will get me things. But if I use that to for the Lord, I think what God's like saying, at least he said to me, was, you know, you can keep doing this, or you can surrender this to me and pick up the cross, and I will use this compassion in a way that's actually going to be effective and satisfy you. Yeah. So anyway.
Man, that's fantastic.
Well, do you want to talk about our Enneagram? What do you think? You can do Mitch first.
Yeah. Hey, there's something, before we jump in there, let me ask you one more question.
Yeah.
And for the motivations, what do you think shapes those? Is that just, hey, I'm just naturally born this way? Or is it, I've been raised a certain way?
Yeah.
Or is it the choices that I've made that have led me to these motivations? What would you say to that?
So this is an unsatisfying answer. At least from the very little research, the research that I've done, even like psychologists and scientists don't have a definitive answer on when personality is formed, because that's kind of the basic question: is when does your personality come out, and when does your motivation like arise? I would say that my slight bent, or what I think probably happens, is I think that generations in your family are more important than I think American culture, or North American culture actually values, like the generations that have come before you. And also, we don't necessarily acknowledge generational sin as much. So I do think you inherit some things. You inherit some things. I also think that it's shaped in childhood as well. how exactly. I think it's a little bit of a mystery, which I think is fine. But so I kind of sit on the side of it's probably a mixture of both. And, you know, and when the day comes out that someone figures out a way to like measure that or figure it out, I am going to be on it. But I do not know more than that.
How about your own story? What do you feel like has shaped your motivation? Is it just your wiring, or maybe things you experienced in childhood?
Oh, that's a good question. So I will say my mom, when she was pregnant with me, prayed that I would be empathetic. And because she believed at least that she doesn't have a lot of empathy, which she does, but she was like, I just want my child to like care more than I do. And she like prayed for that when I was in her womb. And someone could say that was like, I knew that because I was in her womb, or God gave that to me. I would say that would be the case. But so and then when I came home from the hospital, my dad said the James Taylor song, Shower the People, was playing, which shower the people you love with love, you know? And he was like, that's exactly what you turned out to be. So, yeah. So I would say from a very young age, I would give my stuff away to people all the time. I think I'm trying to remember like young, like 7-year-old, 5-year-old Whitney. People would come over and I would just give them my toys. And my mom would get like, tell me to stop. When these are your toys, I bought them for you. You don't even have the authority to give them. There's times where in school events, everyone would give $5 to go to the zoo, and someone traded me their coins for a $5 bill. And I felt, pressured into it. And I was like, okay, sure. And didn't get a peacock feather because of that, things like those are just like small memories of like me giving in an unhealthy way. Yeah. As an old, young, like maybe teenager, I found like this journal entry I wrote. It was really embarrassing to read. There's a lot of those, but this is really bad. I said something, it was like a poem about how no one cares about me truly, that none of my friends actually appreciate me or love me, and I love them more than they love me. And you just don't think that you think these things as an adult. And then I just literally read an entry that was just like calling me out on being at the age of 15, probably, how I just thought that, and I do remember feeling this, just I would listen, I'd be there, they were never there for me. I felt like I was left out all the time, and etc. And I'm not saying that all of that was me, but so those are just little tidbits of evidence that I was probably a 2. I don't know where the motivation came from, but maybe from God, probably, I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like we watched something with there's a assessment out there called 5 Voices, and one of the things that Steve says is, nature, nurture, and then choices kind of make that up. But sometimes I feel like I have a hard time differentiating between what was just nature, who I am, versus how I was raised. Just, I think in my childhood, we had just a very rocky childhood, just very chaotic. So there's a lot of emotional trauma, maybe too harsh of a word, but just baggage that came out of that. And so sometimes even now as a 34-year-old man with a wife and kid, I still have a hard time differentiating between what is just who I am and what is a result of being raised, that kind of thing as a kid, which I don't want to sound like I'm throwing my parents under the bus. We had a rough childhood. God redeemed it later on. But I always have a hard time kind of wading through those waters. And it sounds like it's probably just really different for everybody.
Yeah, I will say this, another thing I like about this tool is that it has kind of like a sliding scale of stress and security. Mm-hmm. So it has language for people who've gone through trauma. So if using, like, let's say a 1 on the Enneagram, when they're in stress, they'll look a lot more like a 4. Mm-hmm. They'll be a little bit more moody and cut off from people. Mm-hmm. And then when they are in security, they'll go to a 7 and they care less about the rules and being good. And so they're able to have fun, maybe even break the rules. Whoa. So like you're not necessarily, there is like movement on it. So you can kind of have elements of other motivations. But yeah, so that could also play into how easily you go to your stress and security number. And like one other thing I'll say is like one is not better than the other. It's not like a health or not healthy number. It's I feel safe and I feel confident and I feel okay. And then the other number is like I'm stressed, and that could be good stress or bad. So and so that's a little bit of information that would probably take another podcast to talk about. Little tidbit.
We may have to come back to that. I love any type of wiring personality stuff I could talk about forever. Kylie probably gets sick of it. Well, Kylie, let's jump to the question you had a minute ago. Sorry, I took us on another route there.
Oh, yeah. So talk about the one.
Okay. I'll talk about the one.
So which I am a one, myself. At least I think so.
You think so? Okay. I know you said that the 3 was up there too.
Yeah.
I'll start off by saying a major difference between a 1 and a 3, just for people who might be like, I could be a 1 or a 3. Ones have an inner critic that constantly criticizes everything they do. It's pretty, if I ask you that question, what's your answer? Do you have an inner critic?
Oh, absolutely. And even going back to what I was saying about earlier is so I have have an inner critic, but I also grew up with a dad that was very critical. So sometimes I have a hard time differentiating between what's inner critic, what's just childhood, things going on. So that's kind of a wrestle for me sometimes.
Yeah, I would say there's probably your parent does affect that a lot, but for ones, the inner critic is pretty constant. And for 3, there's no inner critic, but there is shame. But the shame for a 3, similar to the one's inner critic, fuels them to achieve and do. Another major difference between a 1 and a 3 is a 3 is feeling oriented and a 1 is action or gut instinctually oriented. So ones are more impulsive about acting and getting involved, and 3s are more eyes on the prize types of people. So 3 will read the room empathetically pretty well, but they have an agenda, a motive, a goal, and it's kind of like they'll use charm. They may not be mean about it, but they're going to go to for their end goal. And a 1 is going to maybe get caught up in what's the right way to do it. Is this good? And maybe submit to that a little bit more. So, 1s won't cut corners and 3s will.
That's funny.
So those are kinds of some motivational differences that you guys can use that hopefully help people.
That's pretty. I am always task over people. Mm-hmm. I am very task oriented, very low people oriented, low empathy. Like I just don't, honestly, if I have to be intentional about thinking of people, because I really have a hard time doing that. Yeah. And so until I became a believer, then that was a big change for me, because if everybody's made in the image of God, then everybody deserves care and thoughtfulness and empathy. And so that was a big change for me because I remember, so I started a business when I was 20, ran until I was about 25. And for me, people were just an object to me making money. That's simply what they were. And so when coming to faith, that was a big change where I was like, okay, I have to actually grow in the skill of empathy. And then I married my wife, Olivia, who is extremely empathetic, like just insane. Like for me, empathy is like writing with my left hand. It's just hard to do. And so, but I find that I naturally, going into a situation, will see the prize. So I'm identifying when you talk about the 3 there, I'm identifying with that. But then there's also the part of the 1 with me now, I think as a believer, where I'm like, but I have to do this the right way. And I want to make sure that I do this the right. And beforehand, probably not so. I would, but I think now as a walking with Jesus, it's like, I really need to do the things the right way. I need to be a man of integrity and that kind of thing. So, but not a feeler at all, which is kind of wild to me, because if I'm going to do a Myers-Briggs, I'm going to rank pretty high on the T. Yeah. But as you said with the 1, I really identify, like if my wife was sitting here, she'd say, yeah, Mitch gets pretty moody, I can and there's always this kind of tension that I have of being a high T, but then also being really moody and in some ways kind of emotional sometimes. Like, I'm not emotional. I'm a T. I'm a thinker. I'm rationale, kind of thing. So anyways, it's kind of this tension that I, face sometimes, and it's hard to navigate.
Really hard. I mean, I will say, like, for ones in particular, specifically, they usually do it alone whenever they're going through that moody, broody moment. So no one knows unless they are in, unless the one who has the inner critic feels like they can be honest and they won't feel like you're being critical of them. So that's pretty hard to find, which is like a wife or a mom, pretty much. I will say that something that I've kind of, in studying, realized about ones is that they also, I'm losing my train of thought. 1 second. It's coming back. Okay, it's back. I think it's back. Okay, yeah. So when they are navigating morality, sometimes people think, oh, they're like goody two-shoes. No. It's what they define as good and bad. And it's usually what the collective says is good and bad. Sometimes, depending, it could be what they think is right, and it could go against the grain. But for the most part, there's the morality defined. Like you're saying, you became a Christian, all of a sudden, valuing people's lives and caring about them is now good, So now it's important. When before, maybe good was, I need to maybe provide and do things right and not skip steps and et cetera, So just kind of like a stereotype of the one. That doesn't mean they're like morally righteous people, but they can be self-righteous. That's about what they think is good.
Totally. No, that would definitely, in fact, we do a culture index here at work, and one of the way that my dots had lined up, basically I was very autonomous, but also really fast paced and detail oriented. And I was like, he kind of explained it like the A on it is like gas pedal, and then the D is like the brake. And I'm like, hey, so the way that I'm described, I have my foot on the gas pedal and my foot on the brake. Like, what's up with that? And then he said, what? He goes, normally, I forgot all he said, but he ended up actually saying, this is in front of everybody's staff. He goes, you think everybody in the room's an idiot. And it's true, though. Yeah. I mean, I can be very self-righteous and very like, I'm a leader. I'm going to get things done. I'm going to get it done right because of high detail. Like, we're going to do this. We're going to do it quick. We're going to do it right. This is going to be awesome. But I do have a tendency to become very self-righteous. Yeah. And what's also funny about something you said was that on the whole 4 thing, that was also very private for me for, when I came to faith in Christ, I was single largely for about 7 years. And then when I got married, now I have a mirror that sleeps next to me every night, and my wife that reflects what I project. And I found out that there's more moodiness and things than I ever realized there were because there was nobody there to reflect it. So that's pretty funny. And even with the 7 going back, because you said like in kind of a, would you say a healthy place someone goes to a 7?
It's not necessarily healthy, but secure. So
secure,
like good times. I'm confident in myself. You got to go to 7. Aren't you like, let's break the rules. Let's do something fun, let's relax and joke around.
Yeah, that's so I would say like at home, total 7, either 7 or 4, not 1. Like I'm just either one of those things like around my home. Cause my wife is someone who I'm totally secure with. She's my best friend. She knows every part of me. And so there's full acceptance there. Like I'll even do stupid stuff that most people would be like, what are you doing? And it's normal for her. Yeah. She's just like, what's the big deal? I can freely do that. So, and I think even as navigating as a young person, there's a lot of conflict just because you're like, why am I this way here, this way here, this way here? Mm-hmm. And it seems like what the Enneagram does, it really kind of helps you navigate to see why you are the way you are, even in certain settings or maybe moods or communities of people. Yeah,
exactly. And I would say, so kind of like, I'd say the heart of it for people who have this motivation is, there's this feeling of I need to be good and correct and above reproach. And if someone else reproaches me, I've failed. So there's this inability to like be criticized or reproached by other people. So they kind of have to edit and make sure that they are good and correct and right so that no one else can do that to them, which, and then on top of that, like what it also can bleed into the relationship with God, where you can kind of start to believe that you need to do that with him. I need to come to you when I'm good, right? Perfect. I need to say the prayer ABC in this way. I need to, if I did this wrong, you know, like the concept of grace for ones is very hard to grasp. And so, yeah, that I would say for sure, for anyone who has the one motivation, it's wrestling with that God is the perfecter and that you're not. And he's the potter and you're the clay. Like, you are not shaping yourself and everything, and all your attempts are not worth anything. So it's like, but then, you know, it's this idol of needing to be in control of your righteousness. And so that I would say is the heart of the one.
You're hitting me to my core right now. You really are. You know, somebody actually somebody had written some songs for Enneagram types. Mm-hmm. I think it was, and one of them sent me one because I listened to the 3, and that's really that's what it was when I was wrestling. But like, I wonder if I'm at 1 or 3, mm-hmm. and it was the 1, and I wish I could find that song. It may have been.
Yeah, I think that song's about grace.
Oh man, it is. And I was in tears, and I don't cry, but I was in tears, like, that's me, man. That's, you know, like
he's singing it. Yeah, exactly.
This is for me. And even you know what's funny is I was even watching the Avengers Endgame, and when I forgot what she says. What's Tony Stark's? What's her name?
I Love You 3000 or?
Yeah, no, it's the Pepper. Yeah, at the very end when he's like finished, like, and he's like dying. I forgot what she says, but it just like hit me to the core. But it was like very much
it's done now. Like,
it's done now. Yes.
You can stop working.
Oh man, like that was like, oh man, I was tearing up on that. I was like. And I think when, what's so funny is when Jason Witten retired, like, my wife gives me a hard time because I didn't cry at our wedding, but I cried when Jason Witten, the tight end, retired for the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, she still holds me to that. But, you know, they did this press conference, and it was all about how hard he worked and how he gave himself for something bigger. And I was just in tears, and I had to take her. I actually have in my office an autographed signature of him, and I had to take her in there and show her and explain everything.
Let me do this, honey. I understand you don't care. Yeah. Let me do this.
So
I need to do this.
Anyways, but it was so that was that's just kind of insight to just how I'm wired. So that's fun.
I will say, just because I don't want to end on such a negative note on the one, but like, positively, I think that for once they need to discredit their inner critic. So one method that I heard: take one sock and throw it under a dresser and leave it there for a week and don't touch it. Or leave it there for as long as you want to, but you'll notice that your inner critic will just go, there's a sock under the dresser. The sock's not doing anything to anybody. No one can see it, but no one knows it's there but you. Why does it matter? And so, break some of the things you think are good. Maybe they're good practices, maybe they're wise, but break some of the code of ethics that you've created that are outside of the gospel. And allow yourself to, like, not make your bed, or to load the dishwasher by just throwing all the dishes in, letting someone else do it without literally, dying inside. And then, but on a deeper note, God has given once an ability to see what is right and just, and an action oriented towards it. And there's forward movement in ones towards justice and righteousness, and the righteousness of God. And if they're able to submit to the Lord, the beauty of this gift is that they will do it. If they go to the Lord and not ask to fix the world, but ask the Lord to give them a vision or a specific calling to something, they will go and they will do it, and nothing will stop them, because the thirst for righteousness is real. So that's the upside, is for one that turns to Christ, you're on fire, you're going, and you're going to seek it out. So
that's good. Well, I always feel that in the inner critic, that very much is you're pursuing your own righteousness, pursuing that feeling like the world's not going to be changed unless I do it. You just constantly put that kind of weight. So truly resting in just faith and being justified by God because of Christ and not based on my works is still, as a 34-year-old man, been walking with Jesus 10.5 years, is a daily preach, because it's always defaults. Like even I'm preparing for a message for this Sunday I'm preaching justified in Christ. These are things that's simple, but I have to preach to myself every day because I just default to that. So anyways, enough about me. Let's talk about the 7 with Kylie. Or are you a 7? Are you a 3? Let's get down to the bottom of this.
The mystery. The mysterious woman.
Yeah, me and Whitney had this conversation. And in the moment, I was convinced, okay, maybe she's right. Maybe I am a 3. But then I went back and thought about it more. And I don't know. And you can be like, no, you're
Whitney,
wrong.
did you tell her she was a 3?
Oh, we'll talk about it.
Well, and then, yeah, so I don't know. I think just because when I read the book, I read both of those and where it talked about your childhood and the things, the 7 was the one that made me want to throw the book across and be like, no, this is wrong. But also I feel it. And the 3, I was just yeah, I relate to this, but it didn't really do
Jab
that.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's ask some questions. That's okay?
Well, and there's a list of this, and this, and I checked off way more.
By the way, Kylie's pointing to the road back to you.
Go back to you.
We used to do videos, so I'm over there. But and the 7s, I just checked off way more than the 3 on the little list of this is this.
Yeah, and that book's very good. I'm not going to discredit that book. That's by Ian Morgan Cron and Suzanne Sabile. Typology is a great thing. And anyway, so I will say major differences between 3s and 7s. Major difference would be 7s and 3s prize, what they're focused on, is a little different. So the 7 is about their basic desire for a 7 is to experience the fullness of life, to have fun, to have to experience the pleasures of life is kind of the best way I can explain it. But it's all based out of a fear of being stuck in pain and deprived emotionally or physically. Deprived is a huge word, being deprived. So they are always wanting the greener grass. So their prize is always chasing the greener grass. Doesn't mean they ever feel like they've gotten there, but they're always chasing it. And so when they're walking into, let's say, a party, they're going to be like, how can I make this the greener pasture? And it doesn't really necessarily have anything to do with other people. It has everything to do with I want this to be an experience where I'm not feeling in pain and deprived. So I will make it an experience that's great. And there are introverted 7s out there that just don't go to the party and read a book. And they're great too. But I wanted to put that out there because that can be confusing for people. But then there's 3s. I think 3s walk into the room thinking how can I use the room to get success or value?
3 sound like a politician.
Yeah, I would say they're politicians, but this is I guess the basic desire for the 3 is to be successful and to be seen as successful, and their fears of being worthless and a failure. And ultimately with 3s, it's they tend to be the hardest on themselves whenever they do hit that realization that their life has been motivated this way. But the story is that they were told as a kid that they are not going to be loved unless they put on the mask that people hand them. So 3s can just pick up the mask, put it on, pick up the mask, put it on. And so what ends up happening for 3s is that their motivation lies literally in being the mask, being the mask rather than being so if they're supposed to be an MC for someone's wedding, they will be an MC. If they're supposed to be charismatic, speaker, they'll be charismatic speaker. But ultimately, they just are constantly feel like they're galloping and tripping over the fact that they just want to be loved and have value. And the only way to get that value is to earn it through achievement. So So the I and the pride is achievement and validation from others. And others is a huge focus. And 7s, others is not necessarily the focus. So I don't know if that's helpful, but what are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, what are you telling them?
Yeah, I think I relate to the 7, like the deprived thing. Like I think that sometimes is where it can get muddied, is because the reason I do want to achieve things is so I'm not deprived of like money, so I can have fun, or so I can have experiences. Like, so I want to like do that so that I can like have I just don't want to have this like boring, stale life. Like, I don't know. I think that's the thing in like the part that I read about the childhood when you were 7, it was like you were made to feel or told that like you have to do it all on your own. And I think I did feel that because my parents got divorced when I was like 9, and I was kind of like, I had to like, my mom was just kind of emotionally distraught. And so I was like, okay, I have to be like the strong one here, and like I have to make grades. And I think I thought maybe like my dad like left, so I needed to like, okay, I have to like do this. I have to like, he left, so I need to like do the, like be strong for my mom and like do good so like my dad will still love me or something like that. So I don't know. But yeah, I think like, I don't know, I think a little bit. And when you guys were talking about nature and nurture, I think like the nurture, I was like nurtured to like achieve. And like my dad is in like the corporate world, and he was always like, be a lawyer, be this, like, so you can have like a stable income. So I think like the more you talked about it, I was just like, yeah, like relate to the 7, because I just want to like have fun and have a fulfilled life and have like experiences. Like I don't want it to be boring. And I think that's my fear. And even with like in the future of the marriage, I'm just like, I don't want to be stuck in this boring marriage. Like
It's your biggest fear is living a boring life.
Just scared, like, because I feel like it goes by fast, and then I'm just like, I don't want to like miss it or waste it. And even like, I feel like my college experience, I was like, oh, I want to play volleyball, even though I was getting kind of burnt out, but I was like, well, I don't want to regret not doing it. And then when I was there, I was like, oh, but I think I'm missing out on being in a sorority and like going to this big like state school. So I like transferred to UT and like did this sorority and like kind of like push my way, even though I feel like now looking back, like, yeah, you probably didn't need to like do all that and be in a sorority, like, but that was just me fearing of like missing out and like missing something. Cause I went to UT a year without being in a sorority, and I was like, I would just see all these people in their Greek shirts, and like I made friends with a bunch of girls that were in a sorority, and I was like, I think I'm missing out on this. And like, yeah. So I think all of that is like what, home for you.
Yeah. I'd say like, I think the best way this is a good example of like the best way to view it is like you ultimately have to find the thing that kicks you in the gut, you know? Yeah. And so you can have everybody in your life say, oh, I think you're this, or think you're this, which I've had that happen. But I think ultimately what the substance of it, which we were talking about earlier, is the thing that points you back to Christ and like points you back to like maybe the vice that you're dealing with. So like, I guess I'll describe the 7 a little further, and then you can just maybe tell me an experience that you might relate to. So for 7s, they are in the fear triad or anxiety. They struggle with a lot of fear, but out of 5, 6, and 7, which are in the fear triad, 7s, I think, deal with anxiety a little bit secretly. So they're very happy and bubbly on the outside, and the anxiety usually pops up at night or alone and in the dark. So the anxiety for a 7 is feeling like they're running from something, running from being stuck, maybe of their feelings about like negative feelings, usually about a situation they were in. So when a 7 maybe finds themselves dealing with negative emotions they don't want to deal with, they'll usually go to anything to get them to not think about those negative feelings, which can lead to a lot of very dark moments alone. And even people who know 7s well might not know how much they deal with like anxiety. So they're just constantly trying to self-soothe their anxiety. And sometimes it's through substances like alcohol and partying. And sometimes it's even just disassociating and numbing out. And everybody can deal with anxiety. I wanted to say that because you can have an anxiety disorder and be any number, but the specific reason for this anxiety is it trying to escape. It's trying to escape feelings and sadness and being stuck. So also 7s tend to feel like the weight of having to carry the energy of the room when they walk in, because everyone's depending on them to bring that life. And I think this applies for introverted or extroverted 7s. They just kind of feel like people are leaning on them, and that can cause them to feel exhausted as well, especially if they don't want to be there. So if they don't want to be there, then it's like everyone's like, what's wrong with you? Why are you this way? You're always like happy or at least positive, and you're right now just like dragging us down. It's because they're always feeling like they have to carry the weight of the energy of the room. And then lastly, I'll say about 7s, when they are insecurity and stress, 7s go to 1 in stress. So when they're stressed out, they can kind of become more anal, is that the right word? Yeah, just like focused and a little bit more irritable irritably organized. So this pillow needs to be here. Everything needs to be here. So it gets very, very, the switch can be kind of shocking to people, because all of a sudden it's very like, everything's cool, let's have fun. It's like, no, this needs to go here. Why aren't you doing your job? So they can be very like task oriented. And the worst part about them going to 1 in stress is that they can get a lot done, and people can see that it's very good that they got a lot done. And so they don't recognize the stress in the 7. So they go, oh, they're just being productive. They're like, oh, no. They're very stressed. They're about to like explode. So if you have 7s in your life, just know that if they're very productive, you might need to ask how they're doing. This is true. In insecurity, 7s, they go to 5. So 5's basic desire is to be competent and knowledgeable and useful, and their fears of being incompetent and useless and incapable and out of control of themselves. And so when a 7 goes to 5 in security, they're able to chill, step back, observe their life analytically, and kind of realize the importance of things and the importance of like isolation and inaction, like getting to know your thoughts and not having to carry the weight of the energy of momentum forward, like just maybe being nostalgic for a second, maybe being introspective and getting into something, just being able to be alone and be introspective is something a 5 does naturally. And so when a 7 does that, it kind of just like cools the jets a bit. It's like a computer that's been running for way too long. It's like cools down. So that's just some few things about the 7. So do you think did that kick anything? Okay.
I like all of it. Because whenever I get stressed, I start cleaning or I start like doing it. I like start a new project and I'm like, okay, let's do this. And then I'll be like really productive for a long time until I like stop. And then, So
gonna keep you stressed out more.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah. No, I relate to all of that.
Yeah. I will say just because we did it, with the 1, but with the 7, God gift. The God gift in the 7, we'll start with the gift first, is that they do have a genuine joy and like hunger and for hope and optimism that is great. Not just optimism, but also objective optimism. Like they're analytical. They're able to objectively see what is good in life, what's happy and what's fun. And all of those good things, like I feel like when it's rooted in God, the 7's able to actually find a truer joy than the one that they're finding in temporary things. So the dark side for the 7 is that they can use just a constant feeding of pleasure, just like looking for any sources of making themselves feel satisfied and happy, and then ultimately not feeling satisfied, usually burning themselves down. It's almost like a self-destruct mode where they're seeking for avoiding what's painful and suffering and not being able to sit in suffering at all, causes them to be propelled into more destruction, which leads to more suffering, which leads to more destruction. So it's like this awful spiral. So when rooted in Christ, they're able to suffer and find joy in suffering. So that's like the nugget for the 7 is being able to find the true joy in suffering. That doesn't sound fun. I'm sorry. It doesn't sound fun, but I guess if I could spin it in a fun way, it would be like finding the fountain of youth. It's hard to find, but if you do find it, you will be happy even when you're suffering. You know, it's like, it's a journey. You have to look for it. But I think 7s have a knack for adventure and long suffering. So anyway.
It's a really good word.
Yeah, I think this whole like past probably like 2 years has just been, it was like almost like 4 years ago now, like really like, okay, I'm going to follow the Lord. Like I get it. I didn't get it before. And then like 2 years, it was like, okay, now you're going to like start learning about yourself. And I feel like before I would literally never say I had anxiety because I think I just suppressed, like I did anything and everything. And now that I'm like, can't go to those things like partying or whatever I did in college to like not, I don't know, to not deal with it. Now I can't go to that. So it's like coming out and just like graduating and naturally like not having as much security. So I think this like, it's just been like cool to learn all this stuff, but it really like sucks at the same time. It's like hard. And I'm just like dealing with like all the fear and anxiety like I never have before. And just like, yeah, what you said about all of that. And I think this is like, I'm just now like figuring that out because I just like suppressed everything for so long and was like, no, I'm just gonna have fun. It's gonna be fine. We're gonna move on. Like life's great. And so and I will say like for 7s, I would say that it is really, the belief is that you can't depend on anybody. And so their statement is like they have to depend only on themselves. And so learning to at least depend on someone. Obviously, depending on Christ is great. I don't know, that's number 1, but learning to try in little small ways to depend on other people and let people know, hey, I'm anxious, you know, that's the best way. Anyway, so I don't know if you had any more.
No, that's great. You know, one of the things that just kind of listening to this in Enneagram is it really points out, you know, he's getting motivations, which is kind of that always motivation kind of leads you to identity and where you're kind of finding your identity. And I feel like what it allows someone to do is really figure out what that is, which leads to a wilderness experience of being, I don't know, when you look throughout Scripture, you see God put Moses in the wilderness, you see God put David in the wilderness, you see God put Jesus in the wilderness, and there's these moments of really having to wrestle with kind of really truly who they are. I mean, even when you think about David, he's named king, but then he's shoved out into the wilderness for, I think, 12 years, and he's just doing menial task of like sitting there just watching animals and guarding animals, you know, and I think he wrestled a bear or a lion or two in there, but, you know, that was probably as exciting as it got. But it was really a time for him to, I'm sure there was a painful time of introspection, of figuring out who I am, what's my identity, what's God calling me to do. And I think it's a really special moment to have those kind of things. I mean, I think you see anybody that follows Jesus, to truly have intimacy with him, you have to wrestle with those things and kind of go in the wilderness. I'll never forget, I had when I came to faith in Christ, I was single for about 7 years. And, you know, a lot of people along the way were just like, why are you single? Like, why are you this? Why are you that? And, you know, it's just kind of a struggle because you're like, you know, why am I? And it was always like, well, it's the Lord's timing and yada, yada. And people are trying to set you up and stuff. And then I finally had my first pastor who, I think right when I was engaged to Olivia, that conversation got brought up, and I forgot exactly how it went, but basically what he told me is he goes, well, I know what God was doing in your life. He's like, you were in the wilderness, man. He goes, you had to be in the wilderness for 7 years. God had to do things there that he could only do with just you. You know, you didn't need somebody. And so that was a pretty significant, you know, Kairos moment in my life. Was like, yeah, That's what he was doing, like really helping me see some of those, finding my identity in performance and finding my identity in accomplishment and success and all those things. And, he really had to shape and inform me. But anyways, I say all that because I feel like what the Enneagram really helps you do is kind of pinpoint those things and figure out, man, where's the dark side and where am I relying on other things rather than the sufficiency of Christ in my life? So
I'm like, it's cool you said that. I mean, I'm, I can relate, so I've been, single for like 10 years at this point, but like, it's definitely awful at times, but I feel like led to be a little vulnerable and humble right now. But, like, I think as with the motivation of like wanting to be liked and desired and a fear of rejection, God has just like raked me. So, like, just constantly raking me. And I realized like I still have a lot of question marks. And I think that and we're not necessarily promised everything, and I don't have the answers to everything, but I do know that when I've called out to God in my pain, especially in loneliness and especially in rejection, God has answered and given me peace and joy that doesn't make sense. And ultimately, this is where I think the Enneagram falls short. Is it like, oh yeah, I can know I want that, and I can know I'm scared of that. But what does that mean at the end of the day? And I think at the end of the day, the Lord is sufficient to provide for the sorrow of my heart. And even though I still have like, I don't want to be so like haughty to say psalm moments, but it feels like I'm just crying in the night, sometimes God's always there to just be like, it's not, your hope is not in vain for good things. And so I think that, so that's what I would say with the Enneagram. It's like, it's a great tool to be self-aware. It's helped me put language to things I didn't know and helped me understand other people so well and treat them way better and more loving than I was before, at least. But then also, it does, I think you can end up in Enneagram inception if you don't go to God. You can end up doubling down, thinking that the self-awareness was enough and just finding clever ways to deceive yourself and doing the same thing. Now I'm aware that I want this, so now I'm going to pretend that I don't want it. No, that's not how that works. So like Christ is literally the way. I said that. So he is the way, the truth, and the life, but out of this, there's no other way. So yeah, if anybody's nervous, the Enneagram is just a tool. But yeah.
That's good. Kylie, you got anything else?
No,
yeah,
that was really
great.
good.
Whitney, thanks for being with us today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Well, guys, thanks for listening. This is a Roundup podcast. Hey, like, review, share, comment. We'd love to hear from you about the Roundup podcast. Also, follow us on social media at SBTC Collegiate, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then join our Facebook group, Roundup Network. There's a ton of collegiate leaders in there from across Texas and the nation. And it's a great way to idea share, collaborate, and just meet some new folks. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.